Hi, this is a review for the Twilight series by Stepehenie Meyer. To those of you who have yet to read it, decide for yourself whether you want to read it. But you can use my review as a decision helper, and be warned that there will be spoilers. I'd like to call myself an unbiased Twilight reviewer. I read all of the books and I even saw the movie. I call myself unbiased because I loved and hated the series. And I didn't give this book an amazing 10 out of 10 just because of the quote-unquote hot dudes. And please remember, this is just all my opinion, so there's no need to spasm. So here's a quick summary. Twilight revolves around the story of an extremely plain and ordinary girl named Bella and a vampire, Edward. The entire series is based on their relationship, the hardships they go through, and as well as their family and friends. I think the general backbone and the story of the series is pretty wonderful and very capturing. But the writing itself and the major flaws in it make it highly questionable. Let's talk about the characters. Some characters are very interesting, and I would have liked to see them more, like the vampire clans, both the good and bad guys. But there's a couple of bad in the bunch, and let's talk about the relationship of Bella and Edward. It's very controversial. Meyer is accused of being anti-feminist sometimes, and here we go. Bella is often very helpless, while Edward is the man of the hour, saving her, protecting her, and even trespassing to watch her as she unknowingly sleeps. Bella can't live without Edward, literally. She becomes a zombie without him. Bella becomes very needy, very whiny, and the whine factor puts off a lot of people, and it definitely put me off anyway. I know Meyer had the intention of putting us into a teenager's shoes, but honestly, I don't think anyone wanted to hear a teen whine all day. So the last book, Breaking Dawn, Bella transforms into a Mary Sue. Basically, Mary Sue is a word to say, well, it's a phrase or a name that you would give a character who is too perfect to be real. As for Bella's parents, the dad is a complete pushover, and the mother is a runaway woman in midlife crisis barely to be seen. Bella barely ever calls her dad, and instead she casually calls him Charlie, and I don't know. It just makes it seem really impersonal between Bella and her parents. I know it's not about her parents, but they seem almost non-existent and highly unrealistic. They're not the typical parents. There we go again, unrealistic. It's hard for the readers to buy into this if they actually think about all the pieces. Still, Meyer must have done something right, because I am continually reminded why I bother reading these books. It's the vampires who are so damn intriguing. And the werewolves. It's great stuff. Jacob, who is Edward's rival for Bella's affections, is my favorite character, and I really feel for the guy. He's likable with a personality that feels real. He has flaws. As you may or not know, Stephen King made a comment about Mrs. Meyer. Quote, J.K. Rowling is a terrific writer and Stepehenie Meyer can't worth a darn. She's not very good, unquote. Wow, very harsh. But I think I'm going to agree here. Sometimes I choke a little just because the text is so full of cheese balls. It's cheesy. Let's start off with a couple of quotes from the handsome and amazing and perfect Edward Cullen. Quote 1. Do I dazzle you? Quote 2. Yes, you're exactly my brand of heroine. Quote 3. Sleep, my Bella. Dream happy dreams. You're the only one who has ever touched my heart. It will always be yours. Sleep, my only love. And my favorite, I may not be a human, but I am a man. Now seriously, if a guy ever told me any of that crap, I'd immediately laugh at him for being so damn corny and possibly creepy for comparing me to a drug. So here's one from Bella to balance it out. He leaned in slowly. The beeping noise accelerated wildly before his lips even touched me. But when they did, though with the most gentle of pressure, the beeping stopped altogether. So does that mean her heart stopped? This was a hospital scene, I believe, and Bella is hooked up to a machine. Either her heart literally stopped, which is pretty damn alarming, or she did a terrible job of describing it metaphorically, because heartbeats do not sound like beeping. Next, the writing. It's not very up to par. It gets repetitive, and there are odd words thrown in. For example, I walked alertly to the cafeteria with Jessica after Spanish. So there was something weird about that line, and I just couldn't understand it until I thought, wait, you can't walk alertly. You can walk with your legs and feet, you can look alert, and you can be alert, but walking alert just sounds weird. Her sentences also start with I too much. I mean, you could simply change it around and easily start off with a different word, but no one seems to have caught on to that, neither Meyer or her editor, and I find that really weird. Here are some examples. I waited. I sipped my soda slowly. I dropped my head. And those were just a few from the same page. That's how she writes her actions. That's how Bella talks. It gets boring. And here's a quote from Edward. I always say too much when I'm talking to you. That's one of the problems. Okay, really? Did he need to tell us that's one of the problems? I think we're smart enough to get it the first time. It's like redundant. She keeps adding on to it to tell us things that we could already figure out, and she's like beating us over the head with it. The art of reading is for the reader to read between the lines and not for the author to hold her hands and guide us through everything, right? So next up is the overload of adjectives. He lay perfectly still in the grass, his shirt open over his sculpted, incandescent chest, his scintillating arms bare. So right there, sculpted, incandescent chest, his scintillating arms bare. It's a little bit too much, and it feels like she's trying too hard. And this is the next sentence. His glistening, pale lavender lids were shut, though of course he didn't sleep. That was kind of a dull moment when I read it, because she basically described to us that he shut his eyes, but no, he didn't go to sleep. Of course not. That's kind of the dumbest thing I ever heard. And finally, a look at Bella's thoughts. My mother drove me to the airport with the windows rolled down. It was 75 degrees in Phoenix, the sky a perfect cloudless blue. I was wearing my favorite shirt, sleeveless, white eyelet lace. I was wearing it as a farewell gesture. My carry-on item was a parka. It kind of feels like a bulleted to-do list, you know? Her descriptions are really plain, boring, and too short. Again, the sentences often begin with my or I, and she also uses passive sentences. My teacher always taught us to avoid using passive sentences when possible. So, too much of it can really weaken your writing. And I wondered, shouldn't Meyer know this since she was an English major? There are, in my opinion, some major plot holes, but I won't mention them because they're pretty controversial, and frankly, I'm too lazy to go over it all. But if plot holes don't sit well with you, this novel, well, all of these novels, will not leave you satisfied. I remember after all of the questioning and skepticism, Meyer explained herself, very defensively might I add, on her website and in later interviews. And I find that very discrediting because a really good novel should not need extra tidbits and explanations outside of the book in order for it to make sense to the reader, right? The book that is most controversial of all is the last one, Breaking Dawn. It contains sex, a pregnant teen Mary Sue, actually, and a ridiculously unrealistic child, and much, much more. All for $22.99 or cheaper, considering the last time I was at the bookstore, there were piles and piles of Breaking Dawn books that were on clearance. Well, don't get me wrong. I was obsessed with Twilight at one time, and yeah, I am confessing. I fell in love with the new moon, I went to the midnight release party for Breaking Dawn, I joined fan communities, I zoomed through all of the books in a very small amount of time. I fell in love, and not in the oh my god he's hot way, with many of the characters. However, in the end, it still left me disgusted, bitter, and disappointed. Is the Twilight series worth reading? Maybe. Girls, and maybe boys I guess, interested in hot young men and everlasting love and destiny will fall in love with this series. Older folks who have had a taste of reality may be very displeased. If this kind of thing does not appeal to you, it may still be worth reading. For the common knowledge, you get to be in on what all the girls are reading. And for the laughs. But if you're not willing to try the books, you can watch Twilight, the movie. It's about 2 hours of your life instead of however long it takes you to read a book, and you can decide whether you love it, like it, dislike it, or hate it.